Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
To the Games for Learning podcast here at Games for Change in New York City. So I'm Brandon Pittser. Just to introduce the podcast quickly, we run a podcast out of the Filament Games studio and release that through SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher. Season 1 is already out, is 18 episodes long. And generally speaking, the podcast is about game-based learning theory, interviews with educators, GBL scholars, and thought leaders in the industry. So excitingly, Season 2 will come out today with this episode that is currently being recorded, added in after these initial few. So with me, I do not have my normal co-host, Dan Norton. I don't know where he is, but I have instead Shawn Young. Shawn Young is one of the co-founders of Classcraft, which is a free online educational role-playing game that teachers and students play together in the classroom. The platform allows students to level up, work in teams, and earn powers that have real-world consequences. So acting as a gamification layer around any existing curriculum, Classcraft will transform the way that a class is experienced through the school year. So with that, I'm just going to let Shawn introduce himself quickly and kind of tell us a little bit of your background.
Thanks. Nice meeting you. So I've taught physics for 10 years, and Classcraft came out of my classroom. While I was doing that, I also was working with Devin, my co-founder. I'm a developer, and he's a designer, so we would do freelance work as well. And so when the idea for Classcraft came about, I had the skills the technical skills to do it. I've been long time gamer myself, and just ran with it. And it was only like 3 years later that we finally decided to team up and actually make a product out of it and distribute it.
Sure. So like getting into a little bit more into that that origin story, kind of what was sort of the tipping point for you guys in terms of like, you had this in your classroom, you knew that your students loved it. How did it go from that to being a thing that, lots of teachers are using all across America?
There's actually like a serendipity, basically. I made a little website just to talk about what I was doing. It was a 2-pager. It was really ugly. And it basically said, here's a game I'm running. Other people, you should do this. It's really fun. And the day that went online, somebody just reposted it on Reddit Gaming. And by the end of that first day, 150,000 people would come to the website.
Holy
and
cow.
by the end of the week, 250,000 unique views.
Jeez.
And then the BBC called to do an interview. And everybody was like, how do we play this? And they're like, you can't. There's no product. So following that, it was pretty clear there was market fit.
Sure.
And so I'm based in Canada.
Okay.
Devin is based here in Manhattan. And we actually got funding from the Canadian government to get us started.
Cool. Very cool. So what games were you playing when you first designed Classcraft that may have kind of influenced the way that you designed that?
It was heavily borrowed off of World of Warcraft. I play a lot of World of Warcraft around like 2006.
Porter Alliance?
Alliance. I know.
This is now awkward. Anyways. Please continue.
But yeah, I stopped after Burning Crusade came out.
Wow.
So it was a while ago. But
All right, sure.
One of the things that fascinated me, and which was one of my core values as an educator, was I feel like kids don't work together sufficiently. The system pushes them apart. And so I'd done like some pretty ballsy things early in my career where I'd had taken my remedial math class and paired them together in teams, and their scores on their report card was the worst of the two. So they would have to actually work together, and that was actually really interesting. I stopped it after a while because the stakes were too high, and that's kind of out of those types of experiences that it was like, oh, this has to be like a safe thing, like a game.
Sure.
And games like World of Warcraft have really figured out team dynamics. Like the whole going through an instance and every person on the team is critical and each has their role to play and is really important is really what I wanted to make sure was happening in the classroom. So the team aspect is modeled heavily after instance rating in World of Warcraft.
Sure. And that, yeah, and I'm sure you've got scrubs and pros like any other team dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a tank class, there's a support class, and there's a DPS class.
Sure.
And you
the Holy Trinity.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very cool. So let's get into a little bit more about kind of the mission that you guys have. Now that you've got that attention, now that you've crystallized that focus on your product, what do you feel your mission is now today?
What we want to do is redesign the experience. So, you're doing excellent work over at Filament. You're looking at curriculum more. What we're looking at is a different animal. It's the idea of like, how do you address the fact that you have 35 kids in a room, they're full of hormones, they don't want to be there. How do you make that enjoyable? And once that's in place, then let's bring on like actual didactics and real learning. And so, for us, what we want to do is gamify the whole experience. And so we now have schools that have rolled it out school-wide, and it's like a giant Hogwarts, basically.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
And so that whole experience now becomes part of a game. And, all those rote things that kids do, like, activities, but also like just like the functioning of daily life is now part of a game. And so raising your hand, that's part of a game. Speaking out in class, that's part of a game. Defending another student from a bully, that's part of the game. And so all of those behaviors that we want kids to, experience and exhibit, fall into this larger bucket of that's how you gain XP. And, the game is really crafted to force these like collaborative dynamics. So we're seeing it like completely change classroom culture as well. Which is really empowering because, for Devin and I both, we had different experiences, but we both had, really horrible high school years. And, part of my goal as being an educator was it was kind of ironic. I hated school, right? So why did I go back and work there?
Right.
And for me, it was about making sure that the time that kids have there is pertinent and meaningful for them. And that's really what Classcraft is trying to do. So we're basically trying to gamify everything that kids are doing just in a school setting.
The entire school experience.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
You name it, it's part of the game.
So, I know you guys just hit 1 million users. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very, very cool. What have you what do you feel has helped you get to that point of market saturation? What have you done to kind of lower the barriers to adoption?
Several things. One of the things we did was make a really high value free product.
That certainly helps.
Yeah, and we priced so there's a free version which has core features, and then a premium version which turns on all the bells and whistles. And one of my frustrations as an educator was I would find out about cool tech and there was just no way that I could get it. Like I had a moment where I found out about clickers, those things to like vote, and I was like, I need this. This is gonna make my class so awesome. And I researched online, and it's like $3,000 for a classroom. It's like, there's no way I can get this, and there's no way I can get it approved. And so when we built the Classcraft business model, we wanted to make it so that teachers could find out about Classcraft, sign up right away, and worst case, pay for it out of pocket. So it's a subscription model. It's $12 a month for an unlimited number of students. And, unfortunately, some teachers are paying for that out of pocket, but more and more, like, what we're seeing is like virality within a building. So a teacher finds out about it, gets the premium version. The year after, 5 or 6 teachers want to use it. Administration starts paying for it, and then we move up into the like decision maker ladder in terms of who's going to be buying. Purchasing.
So that's very much a grassroots approach, kind of bottom up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, at Filament we kind of sort of flank that hierarchy, if you will. We do a lot of communication to teachers. We really try to validate our focus on the educator. But there is that divide. There's that divide between the buyer and the user. In some cases, if it's grassroots, then there isn't that divide. But when you're implementing at the district level, there is some dissonance there. So I think, focusing on the teacher, pricing for the teacher in the classroom, and really building for that environment, I think that's a way that you can convince both sides of that kind of coin to adopt and implement.
Well, we just moved into district sales in the last 6 weeks.
Okay. That's very recent.
Yeah, it's super recent. I'm doing the sales right now.
Oh, all right.
And we've had several districts come on board in that short time.
Excellent.
But it's a conversation where it's like, hi, you have 15 teachers using Classcraft in your district. Maybe you should consider, a larger licensing deal. And so it's that top down approach is, we're starting to go there, but it's a different approach than solely going there, convincing those people, and then they have to convince their staff. It's more like,
Right.
we already convinced your staff. All you have to do now is pay for them.
Right.
And so that's a bit of been our strategy there.
And, you know, I think the nice thing about like K-12 sales is once you can get into that first district, that district becomes your case study that is very convincing to additional districts because they are likeliest to listen to each other, you know. So that's great. So, you know, in terms of those two audiences, how do you gather feedback from both sides, and like how do you kind of incorporate that into the product development?
Well, we have user forums, so we've hundreds of thousands of messages from teachers, you know, giving us suggestions, helping each other.
Sure.
So we keep a really, close eye on that. We have people on staff, and all their job is only to listen to teachers and help them. So, you know, they're debugging them, and at the same time they're getting feedback, and they're, you know, passing that on to the product team. So we're really, really listening to our users, and, you know, the original like embryo of Classcraft came out of my classroom and my vision as an educator, and now we're seeing teachers going so much further than what I did, you know, taking it to whole new levels. And it's like, great, we need to listen to those people and see what they're doing and see how we can, you know, automate some of the things that they're doing manually outside of the platform. How can we bring that into the platform so that they don't have to like have a piece of paper on the side to like keep track of stuff.
Now, some of that content is customizable, right?
All of it is customizable. I think that's also been part of our, you know, success there. It's been that, you know, it was clear from the very beginning. You know, I've done PD for teachers. I've done, you know, I was a lecturer for undergrad students in teaching. So it was really clear to me after that time in my career that teachers all have different teaching styles. And if you want to have something that teachers are going to use, like Classcraft, that's going to have an impact on their entire ecosystem, you have to make it so that they can completely change it. So all the rules are customizable. The way kids gain points are customizable. The powers they get is customizable. Like, they can basically make and run Classcraft the way they want. And we see teachers getting super creative with it.
We've seen the same at Filament. Is you provide a model or a template basically for like how you think this stuff can work, but you'll always find that the educator has a better idea than you do when it comes to their classroom. So we found the same.
And it's not necessarily a better idea. It's just their own teaching style.
That's true.
And their own like perspective, and they know their students.
Yep.
You know, we have powers in Classcraft that are there by default, but really, like, are those really meaningful for every single student in every single context? No.
Right.
So, you know, teachers have to be able to talk to their kids and find out what has meaning for them, and then incorporate that into the game.
Right. Well, and I think that's super reflective of just the kind of new mandates for individualized learning, self-paced learning, really treating each student as an individual challenge that needs their own kind of special pacing and content delivery.
Yeah, of course. And in this case, it gives them buy-in in terms of like, what are the rules of the classroom? What do we expect as a society, as our mini society in the classroom? What is that going to look like? And they get to have a say in that, which is very new for a lot of teachers.
Yes.
But transformative, because then kids, you know, abide by those rules because they help decide them.
Right. So I am sensitive to the fact that you've got a flight to catch and get to Denver, where I will be joining you next week for ISTE. But I have one more question before I kind of wrap it up with some Q&A, which is, what do you think the future holds for game-based learning? Where do you think it'll go from where it's at right now?
I think we're like, it's funny because it's like, oh, we're at early stages, but really we're not. Like we've been, you know, Dewey was putting forth game-based learning 100 years ago, right? Or whatever that is. So it's not new. I think what's new is we now have technological systems that empower teachers to do it easily. And, you know, as those systems get more refined and more interesting, we're going to see more and more educators jumping on board. Even in the 2 years since we launched Classcraft, the conversation has shifted. It used to be like, hey, games are good. We have to convince you about games, and then we have to convince you about Classcraft. And now we're walking into discussions, and everybody's clear that games are good.
Yep.
And, you know, and it's not like research hasn't done that. It's just been like, I really believe there's like a grassroots thing going on not only around Classcraft, just around games in general, of teachers seeing the value of that. They want to meet their kids culturally.
Yep.
They know that their kids are playing these games. They want to be pertinent as teachers. And, when the kids respond and are engaged and are interested, teachers love that. So, I just think we're going to see more and more of it. I think, there's some things to figure out in the industry, like, business models and monetization and,
Yep.
Making quality games. You guys know this, making quality games takes a lot of resources.
Yep.
How do you make sure that you can, be sustainable off of that long term?
Right.
So I think there's still some industry challenges, but it's definitely just going to go up and become more and more prevalent. I also think that, we're going to see more and more gamification and game-based learning around things that we hadn't thought of. Assessment is still how do you gamify assessment is still an open question.
Yep.
How do you gamify note taking? How do you I think there's all kinds of little niches as well around the game-based learning space that we've been focusing very much on the didactical learning content and
Yep.
skills aspect. But I think that there's a larger opportunity that's going to, emerge from that as well.
And I think we can see that in Classcraft. It's more of an expansive approach. It encompasses more than just tackling individual content areas, which I think is really cool. So typically we will end the podcast with kind of a loose game. And today the game I would like to play is question and answer. So with the vast audience before us, I'm going to turn it over for questions from the audience if you've got anything.
Podcast listeners, he's chuckling because there aren't that many people.
Okay. Shawn. So a question there from Bobby Locks, listener to the podcast. So I'll just repeat that question quickly. So Bobby was asking if how Classcraft has kind of overcome the dynamic of reward being sort of an anti-motivator because it implies that the activity itself is unpleasant, and so you should be rewarded for it. And his question for Shawn is how he navigates that.
It's a really interesting question. I've never had that one before, but it's very perceptive. I think that there's a few things about Classcraft that are completely circumvent that. The first one is the rewards that they get in the game are super meaningful for them. So it's not like they're not getting badges. They're getting real life superpowers. They're getting the possibility to do things they would never be able to do. So eat in class, get a hint on an exam question, hand in an assignment a day late, you name it. And so those are things that they want. That they really, really want, and that have an impact on their real life and on their real stress levels. And so I think that, there's meaning in the game for them outside of the game and outside of the reward system and outside of the behaviors. Are I want those powers. And for a lot of kids, it's really empowering because we interview kids and they're like, so I get to go to the bathroom whenever I want with this power? Yep. But I never get to leave the classroom. I always get in trouble. Yeah, but you can do this now. Really? We just said yes. and so we're actually empowering some of these kids who feel they have no power. And that's really transformative for them as well. The other aspect, I think, is the social aspect. Maybe you don't care about leveling up your character or about the game, but if you don't, and you don't at least do a little bit of things to help yourself, you're actually going to penalize your whole team. And that I go back to that instance rating in World of Warcraft. If you're not healing the tank because you don't care, everybody's gonna die, and it's all gonna be your fault. And so and that seems like we're putting social peer pressure on these kids, but actually what it is teaching them about the value of collaboration. And if you get disengaged, that's gonna have an impact on your friends and on the people around you. So I think that as well is at play. Another thing that we saw is our Classcraft is very authentic in its aesthetic. You know, we have kids who tweet things like, my Classcraft character is way cooler than my World of Warcraft character. And I'm like, success. And they get really, really attached to that character. So they want to, and this is surprising to me because I'm not that type of a gamer. I'm like, I don't care what my character looks like. I just want him to be as powerful as possible. But when you're 14 or 13, you know, or 12, that representation of you as a more powerful, cool version of yourself is actually really, you know, empowering and defining. So, you know, I've had kids come up to me and like, Shawn, I need 5 GP today. I'll do anything to have 5 GP. I'm like, what? Gold pieces? Why do you want 5 GPs? Like, I want my bear helmet. I've been saving for it all week. and so, you know, there's actually real motivations within the game that are. The question there is, do we have cosplay? We do have kids who have sent us pictures of them who have made, you know, actual real life costumes of our characters and come to school dressed up as them. So I wouldn't say it's like happening a lot, but there's been several instances.
Yeah, I think the really key thing you hit on there is that if you bake that reward structure into an identity, it becomes less obvious that it's something that's rewarding an unpleasant task because it's encompassed in this larger structure of identity and avatar.
Well, and one of the things we've seen is that the kids after a while stop caring about the rewards. We've seen kids who, you know, the game teaches them about collaboration. We've seen kids who spontaneously start helping each other in class because they want points. And then they say, look, I helped him. I want points. And after a while, they stop asking that, and they actually go to other classes that don't have Classcraft, and they exhibit the same behaviors that they were exhibiting in the class with Classcraft. And so really what they're doing is internalizing those reward mechanisms. They actually feel good about doing those behaviors that are expected of them. And that's really transformative because it transcends the game entirely at that stage.
Very cool. Any other questions? Perhaps not. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for today. So Shawn can run over to JFK and make his way to mountainous Denver. So thank you, everyone, for coming today and wrapping up your Games for Change Festival experience with us. Just another quick reminder that Season 2 of the Filament Games Podcast launches today. So be sure to subscribe on Stitcher, iTunes, or SoundCloud and listen to more content like the content that you just listened to. And in fact, your Games for Change Festival experience could just be never ending. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.